Hey, Lashpreneurs. On today's episode, we're going to talk about how do you even start to hire? Like when you have the seed planted and wanting to hire, there's kind of a delay that happens between the idea being planted and you actually going through with the process. Most people get stuck there, right? Where they're kind of contemplating it. They don't know what to do, or they're just like, oh, somebody asked me to work with me and I just said yes. And all of a sudden now I have a team member and I don't know what I'm doing. So we're going to go over that today, but I want to see what you guys want to hear from on the podcast as we start to map out our content planning calendar of what we're going to talk about on the podcast. So if you have a question, if you're stuck on something, if you don't know how to do something in your business, will you DM me and just put in the message somewhere like, hey, I have a podcast idea, boom. Ask the question. I might even support you in working through that question in the DMs, but it'll give us an idea of what you want to hear on the podcast. Yes, we talk a lot about hiring lately because we have really stellar programs for that. We also have a stellar program for building a business as a solo business owner, learning marketing. So really, you let me know what you want to hear on the podcast next, because we are in the middle of mapping out what our next 12 weeks of the podcast is going to look like. So hit me up on the Lashpreneur on Instagram with what you want to hear on the podcast so we can give you what you want. All right, so let's kind of start to talk through the overwhelming process of what it's like to build out a team and where to even begin. So I'm going to go through some questions to ask yourself today, or just things that you should be aware of or thinking through, or asking yourself, like, is this really what I want? But at the end, make sure you stay to the end, because I'm going to give you a link to go get a top 10 questions to ask yourself before the first hire download so that you can print it out if you want, or just really sit and think through, is this what I want to do? Even if you've already started the hiring process, even if you have a team, these are really great questions to ask yourself, because you may not have asked yourself that prior to going into having a team. So first and foremost, you guys you probably know what it is, but y'all need to know your financials. If you do not know if your business is currently profitable or not, that's the problem, because you're not going to get any more profitable by adding in a labor cost. So if you don't, off the top of your head, know, yes, I'm profitable, and even with a range of like a couple percentage points of how profitable you are, like 20% profitable, 40% profitable, not profitable, then you're going to want to start with that before you ever add on a team member. What adding on a team member does is it basically expands what you already have going on. So if you're already losing money, you're going to lose more money by having a team member. It's like pouring water into a leaky bucket. If I just keep pouring in more water, I'm just going to lose more water out the bottom. So first and foremost, you need to understand the financials so that you know what you can profitably afford to pay someone. I don't care what your competitors do. Would you stop looking at them, because it's the blind leading the blind. Your competitors, most of them, because they're in my programs, have no idea what they're doing when they're starting out. They have no idea. So you trying to copy and paste what they're doing or what you're hearing is like average, or how you were treated as an employee or a team member or contractor or wherever, is not likely to be profitable. Most businesses, even outside of our industry, are not profitable. That's why most of them shut down the first 2 years. Okay. If you are profitable solo, that's great. That's something we can build off of. But if you're not profitable solo, you're certainly not going to be profitable with a team. So we have a training called Know Your Numbers Masterclass. If you guys want information on that, DM me on Instagram. But that is where you can start to really understand, is my business profitable solo? And by how much? And how do I increase profitability? Because if you don't know how to do that solo, you're certainly not going to know how to do that when you add on team members. And all of a sudden you have the responsibility of somebody else's paycheck. Yay. All right. So second would be understanding federal and state laws. Now, if you're outside of the US, you're going to have to do your own research on what your employment regulations are. They're different in every country. Even our states have some differences in employment law, but there are federal, like nationwide laws that you need to understand at a baseline level to not get into some deep waters. Still to this day, I get messages all the time about people with their independent contractors and wanting to build a team. I'm like, that's not a team. Independent contractors are not employees. They are not your team. You have no control over their business. They are a separate business that's working under you. But even then, the legalities have gotten way more strict and way more clear on a federal level of what is considered a contractor and what is considered an employee. And it does not work for our industry. It is an illegal misclassification of employment. If you are trying to have a team or any element of control over another business, but you're labeling them as a contractor, meaning they get to charge whatever price point they want. They get to set their own hours. They get to set their own pay. They're only paying you rent. But even then, it blurs some lines. They shouldn't be using your booking software, your supplies, none of that. Okay. We've got plenty of episodes touching on that. If you have any questions, again, hit me up in the DMs. I'm in the DMs all the time. But you need to understand really how to build a team based on the vision that you have for your goals. I am a work with the end in mind type coach, meaning we get clear on what the goals are first and foremost, like what is it we're trying to build? What is the end destination we're trying to create? And then we work backwards to figure out how to get that going, how to set that up, what processes we need. So if you ever want to be able to pull out of the treatment room and stop trading your time for money, if you ever want to have a profitable business and you ever want to have a business that will live outside of you trading time and you putting so much time in, you can't do that with independent contractors, no matter how you want to classify them, even if you're willing to go illegal, right? Even if you're willing to like cut some corners, the government's never going to find out. Fine, cool. However, I'm never going to help you build a business that is at risk of you getting sued and losing everything. I have seen it far too many times where people who are misclassified as independent contractors end up leaving or not making enough money in that job. That was me. I was misclassified as my very first job out of beauty school. I had to file unemployment because I wasn't making enough money as an independent contractor. I was the third independent contractor that they hired, so I was third in line for walk-ins. They didn't do their marketing to get enough walk-ins, so guess who never had clients? Me. Like, I had friends come in, but then I'm paying 50% of my sales to the owner for not getting me clients. No, it didn't work that way. So I filed unemployment. And what that did was that then triggers whatever employment agency is in your state to go, we have no record of them being an employee anywhere because I put down that I had a job and here's where I was an employee. It makes you when you go to file unemployment, it makes you put in where your previous place of employment was. And most of your team members, quote unquote, are going to put in your business because that was the last place that they considered themselves having a job. But without the W-2 that you're submitting on during taxes, there is no record of employment. So now it flags your business to be investigated by the IRS or the employment agency, whatever, because somebody is saying that they're an employee of yours trying to submit unemployment, and they've got to do their due diligence to understand why your business is being put down as a place of employment when they have no record of it. So that's usually how I see that the government starts to get involved in these investigations, because you have no idea that that's happening, right? Like, somebody can file unemployment. They can call in and say, hey, I think I'm being misclassified. I will be completely candid. Anytime I have a 1099 type independent contractor DM me being like, I think I'm misclassified, I'm like, girl, the power's all in your hands. You get to decide what you want to do. You're being taken advantage of. You are well within your legal rights to be able to sue them if you want to, or plant a little seed in the employment development department, whatever, their ear to say, hey, I think I'm being misclassified, so that they can be protected for their federal employment rights. Anyways, that's aside from the point. But also think through this as well. There's other things that when you have an employee that you need to think about, like liability insurance. If you're hiring independent contractors, if their client trips and falls in the parking lot, and you're not both covered by liability insurance, you could lose everything because you can be included in a lawsuit, but you would not be protected under the independent contractor's liability insurance, right? When you have liability insurance, when you have a team, everybody's covered, right? Under the W-2 legal classification, because they are employees. You should also be an employee of your business. We're not going to get into the legalities of that right now, but having at least an LLC at a minimum, no sole proprietorships when you start building out a team, it's too risky. And also things like workers' compensation, right? If somebody gets injured and they can't work, I know it's an added expense, but it is part of the federal employment laws to be able to, if somebody gets injured from a repetitive stress injury, that they're compensated accordingly. And you need those coverages in your business so that your team can be protected and that you are protected as well. So those are just a couple of things to think through. If you're starting to feel overwhelmed by it's a lot to take on, I promise you, once you learn it, you don't need to keep learning it. It's like you go implement it once and then you've got that forever. Same thing with like employment contracts. You need to have a contract that states what the relationship is between you and this employee. What is okay? What is not okay? What is legal? What is not legal? What is the scope of the job? What is not the scope of the job? If there's an accident, what happens? This is all stuff that attorneys do all the time. They make it very, very easy to create an employment contract when you work with them. And then it's done. Then you have your employment contract for the rest of your business. Maybe need some updating as you go or as you get bigger, but for the most part, it's a one and done thing. So it is something to consider and think about before you ever get into hiring. Because look, if you don't have an employment contract in place and yet you have a contractor, what's the first part of contractor? Contract. How many contractors? If you have contractors, have you had signed contracts? By the way, if you have non-competes in a contractor agreement, they don't hold up. Non-competes are for employee-employer relationships. Same with non-solicitation agreements. Just FYI. So things like that are going to be important for you to start to look into, research. Again, if you want to have a legally structured business so that you can protect the profitability that you're about to create with this team member, hopefully, you're going to want to make sure that that money is continuing to come in and it's not something that can be taken away from you because you didn't dot your I's and cross your T's when it comes to the legalities of business. You don't have to have a lawyer on retainer. You book a consultation. You have them write up the contract. Maybe it costs you a couple $100, but it's a one-time expense that then protects you legally ongoing. Highly, highly, highly recommend if you're looking into legal contracts. Rihanna Green of She Trademarks is amazing. She is a former cosmetologist turned attorney who is now specializing in beauty business law. So highly recommend her. All right. What else should you ask yourself or consider? Okay, so I'm going to say these numbers and they're not set in stone. This is just what I've experienced from working with people building teams that has set them up for the most success. I recommend being able to do at least $6,000 to $8,000 a month in sales on your own or more before you ever consider hiring. And here's why. How do I explain this? If you don't have proof of concept, we'll call it, that you know how to run a business, adding on a team ain't gonna help. I kind of equate it to, you know how people try to have babies to save a marriage? Trying to hire a team to save a failing business, that's not gonna work. So we need some evidence that you know how to run a business and that you know how to generate sales and that people actually want what you have to offer. I see this a lot separately I do some business coaching for some online businesses, much like what I run. And we have where they have to test their offer as part of their steps. And, you know, because if nobody wants what you have to offer, then there's no point in building a business around it, right? Like there's people who want to do, they want to make $100,000 in a program that teaches somebody how to do a cartwheel. And they want to charge $59 a month for a membership. Like nobody's paying $59 a month for a cartwheel membership. Like they can figure it out, or the splits or something like that was kind of one of the more odd ones that I saw. You can have a low ticket membership or, you know, something one off. But if you don't have proof of concept that people want to pay you to solve whatever problem it is you solve, then there's no point in building a business around it. And so when you're in the $0 to $5,000, $6,000 a month range, you're still testing out your concept. Or you're not in your business enough to generate enough sales. So it doesn't make sense for you to hire on a team member when you're not in your business, quote unquote, full-time. Now, full-time can be discretionary. It can be anywhere from 25 hours or more. I would kind of consider that as full-time in our industry. But if you don't have proof that you know how to run a business on your own, it's going to get a lot more stressful and a lot more expensive by adding on a team. So again, I recommend, and this is just my rule of thumb, it's not a hard and fast rule. I've had clients who have done $4,000 and $5,000 a month and build a team, but you end up not paying yourself when you're that low. You also should know your profitability. So again, knowing what you're profitable. If you're not profitable by at least, I would say 20 to 30% at a minimum on your own, then it's probably not the right time to hire. You probably need to increase your profitability a little bit. Now, this will vary per business and, you know, your market and how expensive it is to have rent and all this kind of stuff. But general rule of thumb, work yourself to where you can be doing $6,000 to $8,000 a month on your own. You're able to be at least a 20 to 30% profit, if not more. I expect more from solo business owners, that they would be more profitable because you have less expenses because you don't have a team. So again, in our Know Your Numbers Masterclass, we can teach you all of that stuff, but understanding how to market yourself. Because if you're not doing at least $6,000 or more a month, then you may not know how to market yourself. Especially if you've been in business for years and years and years, and all you've really done is just word of mouth marketing, which by the way is marketing, right? If you've only built a clientele through referrals, imagine trying to fill up another 20 to 30 appointment slots in a week for a team member for 4 weeks in a month. You're going to run out of referrals, right? So you need to know some other aspect of marketing that you can grow and do more of when you build out a team so that you constantly have leads coming in. Because if you don't know how to market for other people and you don't know how to market for yourself, well, then you just have a lot of expenses going out. So understanding marketing at a baseline level, at least having an understanding of what marketing is. The amount of calls that I get on and people are like, I don't know how to market. And I'm like, okay, well, how do clients find you? Oh, they, word of mouth. I'm like, that's marketing. Oh, they just Google me. That's also marketing. So understanding how to market yourself and having a baseline minimum amount of sales. My range would be in the $6,000 to $8,000 range. That way you can afford a team member, and then can grow from there and then grow your profitability once they're producing sales. Some other things to think through. Be prepared for your interviews. It is a most common practice from people who are just kind of stumbling into my world and haven't listened to a lot of our hiring episodes, for me to say like, oh, how'd you find a team member? Or how are you finding candidates? Oh, they just DM me. Oh, it was a friend from beauty school. Oh, it's my best friend. We're going to go sign a lease together and she's going to be my team member. Skirt. What? You want to know the number one way to ruin your friendship? Hire your friends. Yeah. I think out of even in just the last year, I've only seen one partnership that actually seemed to work and function well without it blowing up. If you're not willing to fire your friend for them showing up late, don't hire your friends. Your business 100% needs you to make decisions to fire team members that are not in alignment with where the business is going. And 99.99999% of the time, you and a bestie probably aren't in the same vision of the 5 to 10 year plan. And so it's like getting married. You need to have legalities of who gets to make the final decision. You need to understand, what happens if one person wants to get out, if it's not working. I've seen it far too many times where there's quote unquote a partnership, where there's not one person who can make the final decision. Somebody needs to have the 51% of the ownership where they're the final decision maker. And that usually will mean that it comes at the detriment of the other partner, or the team member or the friend or whatever, but somebody needs to be able to make the final decision. And I often find that people try to compensate the partners equally, but one person is doing more of the work on the business and the other one is just kind of riding the coattails. That's usually how it ends up. What happens if somebody gets pregnant and they want to spend more time at home and they're kind of just like part-time in the business now, but they're being compensated the same as when they were working full-time? That happens too. So don't hire friends. I highly, highly, highly recommend not hiring friends. I personally experienced that blowing up in my face far too many times. It's really hard to compartmentalize how you feel about them as a person versus what the business decision needs to be. But yeah, as far as interviews, making sure that you have a way to source candidates that's not just like hopes and prayers and crossing your fingers. If all you're doing is hiring people you're going to run out of people that are willing to work for you. You're also going to feel like you want to pay them more, or they're going to negotiate wanting more pay because of the relationship they have with you. They're going to think that they can show up late or not do things your way because you guys have a relationship outside of the business. It's really hard to write them up or have constructive conversations about what you see needs to be improved upon. So have a way that you can get candidates in the business without having to know them. That's a really great hiring process so that when you're ready to hire the next team member and the next team member and the next team member, you have candidates coming in, just like with marketing. And then just another tip for you when you're thinking through interviews, please don't do 2-hour plus practical interviews or in-person interviews. You don't need to see somebody do a full set to determine whether they can be a good employee or not. We teach to hiring based on mission, vision, and values. I could care less whether they have skill set. The only skills work that we want to assess in an in-person interview is, can they hold a tweezer? Like, how much knowledge do they have? Not that being the barrier of they have to know how to do lashes or whatever the services are, because you should also have an onboarding and training process in place that teaches them how to do everything that you do in the business. They should, at the end of their training and onboarding, produce the results and the experience that your clients have become, addicted to in your business. And you have to train them to do it exactly your way so that it can be consistent across all team members. I don't care if they can do the services at the time that they're doing the interview. We can assess and see where their knowledge level is at to know how to curate and craft the onboarding and training process specific to their knowledge level. But do not waste your time doing 2+ hour in-person interviews. It's a waste of time. Because think about it this way, and I've just mentioned this to our coaching clients, I think in the last week. I said, every decision that you make in your business, when you're thinking about building out a team or really making any decision in business, would this still work if your business was 10 times the size it is now? If you had 10 times the clients, 10 times the team members, 10 times the transactions, 10 times the money coming in and 10 times the money going out, would what you're trying to make a decision on work if we 10x'd the business? If the answer is no, then it's probably not the right strategy or the right move, or it needs, to be processed out and adjusted so that it can be, something that you can grow and scale. So if you're doing 2-hour plus practical interviews, well, imagine if you had 30 applicants and you move 15 of them into an in-person interview. That's 30 hours that you're just going to be sitting there watching somebody do lashes that you're only hiring for 1, maybe 2 spots for. That's a waste of time, right? So what is it you need to know if you need to have any sort of practical part of the interview? What is the bare minimum amount of time to be able to assess it, to know if yes, they can move forward or no, they can't. But again, if don't hire based on skill, if you want somebody who's really going to stick around long term, who's not going to be, if you're not creating a people dependent business, I'll just leave it at that. Let's get kind of towards the end here. So make sure that you have the job offer outlined and thought through before you even post your job. What is it you're hiring for? How many hours? What shifts? Yes, shifts. They need to know what days of the week. You may not need to hire for whenever somebody else is available. In fact, I recommend not doing that. I recommend you looking at where you have the most demand in the business or even look at your schedule of where you want to free up some of your time when you're already working and hire for those specific days and times. Not just, I'm going to hire them whenever they're available. Cool. Because what if they work a full-time job? They're only available weekends and evenings. Well, now you have to stay for weekends and evenings to be able to train them. Do not leave a new team member alone in your business for at least the first 6 months. That is not setting them up for success. There's a lot of liability involved with that. And you're risking them running the business. So why would they work for you? Why can't they just go do it on their own? Most team members don't want to be alone in the first couple months until they fully know how to handle every problem that comes up. And they don't know that in the first 3 months, much less the first 6 months, and even then some. So hire for specific needs of the business, not whoever happens to apply and comes in and they can work, Sundays from like 2 to 6, but then, they can only work Thursdays and Fridays from like 9 to 11. Like, no, we hire for specific needs in the business. And honestly, I wouldn't recommend hiring anybody for less than 15 hours a week, but ideally 20 to 25 hours, start them off part-time. Anybody who's working less than 15 hours a week in your business is not bought on your business. Wherever they're making other income or if they're prioritizing family, that's going to come first over your business. They're not that financially dependent on your business, so they don't necessarily care to work, right? So I've just seen that happen too many times where it's like people have these big giant teams. They'll have 10 team members, but like some only work 1 shift a week, some work 8 hours a week, some work 10 hours a week. And it's like you could replace all of those, get rid of all those personalities, all of those scheduling conflicts, and hire one person to fill all of those hours. So make sure that you've got that outlined beforehand. What is their job? What isn't their job? Do not hire a team member, a service provider to do your social media marketing unless you're going to train them exactly how to do it correctly. I get that a lot when people want to hire hourly. They're just sitting around. What do? I don't know. Give them the Instagram account and let's just see what they can do. No, they're not trained to know how to do it, and they probably suck at it. If you don't know how to do it, they certainly won't. Now they can help and you guys can build out a process together, but we want our service providers in the treatment room producing sales. Then it becomes your job, going back to point number 2 or 3, wherever it was, about learning marketing and understanding marketing. It's your job to market. Get you out of the treatment room, put them in the treatment room to produce the sale. Then you work on the marketing to get clients, to get them more clients, to produce more sales. Okay. So making sure you have the job offer outlined. So that'll be like what their schedule is, what their pay is, what their benefits are, if there are any. If you're hiring for the first time, I wouldn't offer benefits, maybe that they get their services done, but start real easy on perks and benefits when you're hiring until you know what your profit margins are with a team, what their scope of work is, and an employment contract, making sure that you have that in place for their very first day. So let's get to the first day and then we'll wrap up this episode. On their first day, the things that you're going to want to make sure that you have ready to go on day 1 is you need to have all of your legal paperwork ready to go. Some of that may need to be filled out before they show up. We're talking like I-9s and W-9s and all the paperwork legality-wise they have to fill out. their onboarding training at least mapped out for the first month, ideally the whole 3 months, so that you both know what they're doing that week. If you're busy with a client, that they know where they should be learning and training and practicing and what they should be doing during that time frame. That way you can also be prepared to let them know, hey, we need models on week 2 on the Thursday of your shift. I'm going to post some stuff about trying to get you models, but also ask your friends. Here's some shifts that we can use models for if you want to bring your friends in. Having payroll already set up so that the second they walk in your door, they can clock in. You guys go through the payroll, getting them all set up in there so that they can start tracking their time and get paid. And even how do they clock in and clock out, and what are the restrictions on that? Can they do it, from the parking lot? If you have a mobile app, do they have to do it in the salon? When do they take lunches? Just trying to understand that stuff so that on day 1, they're really set up for success. Now, in our onboarding trainings inside the Accelerator program, we recommend your first day with your team member be a half day, right? So if you have them scheduled to normally work maybe a 5 to 8 hour shift, we have like a 2 to 3 hour first day. It's just a happy greet you, how's it going, get familiar with the business, really excited you're here. We don't want to overwhelm them on their first day. We want to give them kind of just a real excitement, great first experience, and then we can start getting into the nitty gritty of the training. But it's really just to kind of set the culture of what it's like for them to work with you and for you, and also just make sure that they're clocked in, that there isn't anything else that kind of needs to be set up. We have a quick meeting, quick introduction to the business, and then they get to go home, and then we kind of get into the rest of it on the next shift. So if you want to know all 10 questions to ask yourself before you hire your first or next hire, head on over to thelashpreneur.com/expand. I'll leave a link in the show notes for you. And then if you guys have any questions about hiring your first team member, or you want to give me, a shout out of what you want me to talk about on the podcast next, you can hit me up on the Instagram DMs at @thelashpreneur. All right, guys, have a good one.